Does the UK already take its fair share of asylum seekers, bearing in mind that if we signed up to this, look, we voted to leave the EU. The EU is not going to let us, as a nation, as far as I can tell, take less as a quota per head of population than its member states would. Why? Because that would tell all the member states, if you vote to leave the European Union, we will then do a deal with you that allows you to take fewer asylum seekers. So why would the EU let us do that? So we're going to have to take our, quotes, fair share. Do we already take our fair share? I'm joined now by former Brexit Party MEP Rupert Lowe and Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London, Jonathan Ports. Jonathan, I'll start with you, if that's all right. Do we already take our fair share?
There's no such thing as a fair share. What the UK needs is a fair, humane and well-managed asylum-seeking system. We haven't got that now, obviously. It's a mess. In order to do that, part of the answer, not the whole answer, but part of the answer is to negotiate, to manage that in conjunction with European partners, even though we have left the EU, because we still share the same geographic neighbourhood with you. Now, what I would say is that, frankly, everything you've said up to now is a mixture of fantasy and lies. There is absolutely no substance whatsoever to, well, the idea that the sort of agreement that is proposed by Starmer, dealing with information sharing and dealing with the allowing some and remember, we've done this before, right? David Blunkett did this.
No. I'm going to. You've got to answer that. So, which bit of that was fantasy and lies? Go on.
The idea that there is any prospect whatsoever of an agreement between us and the EU that would result in us taking between 100 and 182,000.
Okay, so we're 13%. So we are 13% of Europe's population, right? So 13%. So if you work that out across what our quota would have to be, it would have to be about...
No, that's not how it works. That simply is not how it works, because the vast majority of the people who are coming across into the EU do not have any connection with the UK, unlike, for example, the Afghans, who are the nationality who are the most predominant crossing the Channel at the moment. Most of the largest single component of those who are crossing the Channel now are people from Afghanistan, and they're people who have a connection because they work with the British forces, because they have family here, or some other connection with the UK. Now, in the early 2000s, when we did a bilateral agreement with the French to resolve the then crisis crossing the Channel, of people crossing the Channel, yes, we did take some people, and the French took some people back. That was how the deal worked. It did not lead to some sort of massive expansion in the number of people coming here. It was a pretty sensible, practical way of dealing with a common problem. Now, we don't know what an agreement between a Keir Starmer-led government and the EU would look like, but the idea that it's going to lead to hundreds of thousands of extra people coming here, as I said, it's a mixture of fantasy and lies, and nobody in their right mind should take it seriously.
Well, Rupert, I'll throw that over to you, former Brexit Party MEP Rupert Lowe. Is it a mixture of fantasy and lies to suggest that we could now have, upwards of 100,000 people a year potentially coming, with Keir Starmer doing some kind of deal with the European Union?
Well, I don't think that's a fair comment, but having looked at Jonathan's career, a lot of his career is very theoretical rather than practical. What I would say is that structured immigration, Patrick, is a good thing. But what we clearly haven't got in any way is structured immigration. What we've got is a complete mess. And the whole point of Brexit and the Brexit vote, which, if you believe in democracy, was the British people voted to take back our sovereign borders. And that means that our government, elected by the British people, their job is to serve the interests of the British people. And quite clearly, we now have a sovereign nation, that is clear, but we don't have a government that's capable of actually doing what it should be doing, and that means policing our borders. So there are two issues here. I think, first of all, there's the illegal migration at the boats, which we're clearly not stopping. And even though we've got our own navy, we have our own what I call border taxi service, because that appears to be what they are. We aren't policing that. Equally, we are seeing far too many legal migrants coming into the country. I think there is a point here that processing is too slow. There are still 170,000 people waiting to be processed. But what we have to
Look, Rupert, I'm just going to, because we're a bit pressed time, Rupert, I'm just really going to drill down. I want to drill down, right? And do you think what Keir Starmer is supposedly going to do with the European Union will be better or worse than what we've got now, Rupert?
Well, much worse. I mean, Keir Starmer, as I've just said, the British people voted to take back our sovereign borders. And what the Tories are clearly not doing, and I mean, the problem, Patrick, is that the entire Westminster establishment with the civil service behind them is deficient. Okay. So the British people now, at the next election, have a choice. Do they vote for another party who's going to sit in opposition for another, whatever it is, 5 years, and blame the others for all the problems, and then re-elect another party who does just the same? So what we've got to do is we need change. We need complete and change.
So, Jonathan, I get that kind of change that you're talking about. Jonathan, I'll throw it over to you. So, as far as you're concerned, genuinely, hand on heart, you believe that under what Keir Starmer, the kind of thing Keir Starmer is proposing, it would stop the general migrant crisis and it would lead to fewer people rocking up in Britain and for us having to look after through an asylum or refugee system every single year. Is that what you're saying?
It's not going to solve the crisis on its own. It would be an improvement on the chaotic, and I have some sympathy with what you both said about the situation at the moment, which clearly is unacceptable. It is one part of the solution to the current chaotic, unmanaged system.
Is it numbers, though, Jonathan? Come on, just numbers.
Lower numbers coming through legal and managed routes, as opposed to what we have now, which is large numbers coming through irregular, dangerous.
But what about actual numbers of people, regardless of what we bracket them as, right? Whether we do some kind of EU deal where we don't call them channel migrants anymore, we just go and pluck them straight from Lampedusa or whatever we do. Just the numbers of people arriving every single year that we would still have to find somewhere to house. I've just done a piece. We've got British citizens living in shipping containers, right, at the moment, and we're telling them we haven't got anywhere for them to live. So
we do, and we did not have that during the COVID period. Why not? Not because it had anything to do with migration. We still had people coming across the channel during then. The reason we didn't have people on our streets homeless then is because the government took a decision to spend the money and put the resources in to stopping homelessness in the country. We did that at the same time as we had asylum seekers. The two issues don't really have anything to do with each other. If you want to end homelessness in this country, you simply take a political decision to end homelessness. We can do that.
Simply say, if I want to end homelessness, I will simply end. Where do we get all the houses from, Jonathan?
Well, how many did you see homelessness during the pandemic? Why not? Because the government took a decision, a political decision, to devote the resources to ending homelessness. We did that in the late 2000s. We did it again during COVID.
I don't know if you've already done it, Jonathan. I don't know.
I was a civil servant for 25 years. Yes,
and you housed a refugee, did you? And you had refugees.
Sorry?
Do you have people living with you?
Living with me? No.
Yes. Yeah.
Why do you?
It's astonishing, isn't it? The idea that someone you might welcome in asylum. Would you have an asylum seeker living in your house?
If I had the right type of house in the right circumstances, yes.
That's the problem.
Why not?
What kind of house?
There are plenty of people
have you got,
who do
Jonathan?
Exactly that.
No, what kind of house have you got?
I have a 2-bedroom flat. Why?
So have you got spare room then, or not?
I've got a bedroom and an office. I've got a bedroom and an office that I share with my partner. Yes. So it's not for you, but obviously, we could end homelessness with just to be someone else's house, wouldn't it? We could end homelessness by putting people in housing the way that we did in the late 2000s.
Okay.
And the way that we did during the COVID pandemic. There weren't people sleeping on the streets during the COVID pandemic. Why? Because the government took policy measures to end homelessness. It's not that difficult.
But you wouldn't have that policy measure around at your house, though, would you? Be everyone else's, isn't it? I think.
You don't need to requisition people's houses to it. We didn't do that in the late 2000s. You've had Louise Casey on this program before, right?
No, right.
Go on, Rupert.
Louise can tell you how to end homelessness. It doesn't involve. It doesn't.
I get what you're about, Jonathan. I get it, mate. I get it. All right, go on, Rupert. We'll just final word quickly, Rupert.
But the answer to your question is quite simply the one you asked Jonathan just now, is no, it will not stop people coming over in boats. And what it will also do is it will surrender our sovereign right to select who we accept into the country and who we don't. Ultimately, it is the thin end of the wedge. As we know, Keir Starmer and his team are very much accepting of a return to the European Union. Not what the British people voted for. Clearly, they don't respect democracy. Right. And at the end of the day, we need our sovereign borders policed by our own navy and our own police.
All right, both of you, look, thank you very, very much. Fascinating discussion on a few different reasons, I think now.